All right, let's look at our vocabulary words. Biography, true story of someone's life. Emancipate, to set something free. Jealousy, that feeling you have when you want what others have. Conflict is an argument or a fight. Determined, you're going to do something no matter what. A risk is a chance you take that could lead to something dangerous or embarrassing. Curiosity, you just have to know, wanting to learn about all that is around you. Narrow escape, something unexpected keeps something bad from happening to you. And then the new word, wilderness. A wilderness is a forest where there are no people. So it kind of sounds to me like Abe already lives in the wilderness, but you're going to find out that he doesn't. Knob Creek actually had, families. But the new chapter is called A New Home in Indiana. Abe's family is moving, and they are definitely moving to the wilderness. So let's continue our biography of Abe Lincoln by Augusta Stevenson. The New Home in Indiana. 2 tired horses came slowly along the road. On one was pretty, dark-eyed Mrs. Nancy Lincoln. In front of her rode Sarah. Abe rode the other horse with a great bundle of household goods tied on behind him. Mr. Lincoln walked beside the horses. All day long they had traveled, and the day before, and the day before that too. When will we come to the big wide river? Asked Sarah. I thought we would make it by evening, said Mr. Lincoln, but we can't. The horses are too tired. We'll camp in the first good place. And here it is, a spring by the side of the road. This is good luck. Whoa, whoa. He's telling the horses to stop. In another minute, everyone was busy. Mr. Lincoln fed and watered the horses. Then he gathered wood and made a fire. Mrs. Lincoln fried bacon and corn cakes. Abe gathered leaves and made beds on the ground. Sarah took the coverlets from the great bundle and laid them on the leaves. By that time, supper was ready, and the Lincoln family sat on a log and ate. Oh, how good the bacon and corn cakes were. How cool the sparkling spring water was. They talked about the home they had left on Knob Creek. They were all sorry to leave it. But our new home will be prettier, said Mother. Our cabin will be on a little hill. I can draw a conclusion here. I can take information from different places and put it together. We know that the Lincolns lived in Knob Creek, Kentucky. We know that their horses are carrying a lot of their household stuff. We know that they are crossing creeks and rivers, and we know they are camping overnight. We know they are talking about their home in Kentucky, so we can draw the conclusion that they are moving. I don't know how far away, but I'm guessing by the fact that they've been gone for several days, it is far away. Let's keep reading and find out. Children, said Father, there are walnut and hickory trees all over the place. I love walnuts, said Sarah. So do I, said Abe, and I love hickory nuts too. But I'm sorry I have to leave Austin. Austin can visit us, said Mother. And best of all, said Father, corn grows better in Indiana, so I'll make more money than I did in Kentucky. Oh, I'm sure you will, Thomas, said Mother. And now, children, it's time for bed. Will you keep the fire burning all night? Asked Sarah. Yes, indeed, said Father. There are many wild animals in these woods. May I help watch? Abe asked. I may call you later. I'll watch first. The others got ready for bed. It took only a moment. They just rolled up their covers, clothes and all, and soon were fast asleep. Suddenly, Abe heard his father call him. It was his turn to watch, so he jumped up out of his covers and went to the fire. Why, this isn't any fire at all, he said. Then he piled on wood until he had it blazing. No beast will come near this fire, he said. They can see it from far away. Then he piled on more wood, and he kept the fire blazing for a long time. Suddenly, he noticed that the fire was going out. He looked for wood, but there was no more. He was frightened. What shall I do, he thought. He didn't dare go into the dark forest for wood. The blaze went out. The fire was only smoking now. All around was a wall of darkness, black, black darkness. And now in this wall of black, Abe saw 2 green spots of light. The eyes of some wild animal. They were coming toward him. Nearer and nearer they came. Father, he called. Father, Father. Wake up, said his father. Abe opened his eyes and sat up. It was just daylight. The fire was burning. Bacon and corn cakes were frying. Why, I thought I let the fire go out, said Abe. I saw 2 green eyes watching me. You had a bad dream, said Mother. Didn't I watch the fire at all? No, said Abe. Your mother and I did. I'm glad it was a dream, said Abe, but I learned how to keep a fire burning all night. How? Father asked. A low fire, no blaze, and just a little wood at a time. That boy learns in his sleep, said Father. They all laughed. Then Abe crawled out of his covers and Sarah crawled out of hers. They washed at the spring and combed their hair. Then they were ready for breakfast. Again the Lincoln family sat on the log and ate bacon and corn cakes. Then on they went toward the beautiful Ohio River. And here's a picture of their little campsite. Into the wilderness. A ferry boat took the Lincolns, horses and all, across the Ohio River. When they reached the shore, they were in Indiana, but they were still far from their new home. Mr. Lincoln hired a big wagon and hitched up his horses. The others threw the bundles in and sat on them. Then off they drove into the wilderness. Mrs. Lincoln and the children had never seen such a dense forest. Dense means really, really thick. There was no end to it. They had to travel slowly, for the road wasn't much more than a path. At times, Mr. Lincoln had to cut away tree branches so the wagon could pass on. Of course, Abe helped. He knew how to handle an axe because he had helped his father in Kentucky. The trail was very rough. Sometimes the wagon bumped over big roots. The whole family would bounce in the air. And here's a picture of them. You see how thick the forest is? But that didn't worry the Lincolns. The more they bounced, the more they laughed. It's fun to bounce, said Abe. I like it. So do I, said Sarah. Now a wide creek had to be crossed. The children watched the water creeping up closer and closer to the wagon bed and were frightened. Mother didn't seem to like it either. Thomas, she called, the water will come into the wagon. Oh, that won't hurt anything, said Mr. Lincoln. We can dry everything in the sun. Why, of course we can, said Mother. I didn't think of that. And your feet won't melt if the water does cover them, said Father. You're neither sugar nor salt. That's true, said Mother. We'll just play like we are wading in the creek, children. What fun those two children had then. The water did come into the wagon, up to their ankles, and they could wade sitting still. After that, they were eager to cross creeks, so on they went, farther and farther into the great wilderness. On they went, bumping, bouncing, wading, and laughing. The log cabin. At last they reached Mr. Lincoln's land. There was no clearing, no cabin, no shelter of any kind. There was nothing but dense, dense forest. The children had no time to be afraid of Indians or wild animals. They had to go to work at once. Mr. Lincoln and Abe cut down small trees and made a shed with the poles. It wasn't much of a home, but at least it was a shelter from rain and snow. Then came the new log cabin. Large trees had to be chopped down and made into logs. The logs had to be cut certain lengths. Large stumps had to be pulled or burned. It was all hard work, and the weather was cold and wet. All winter long, on every clear day, Abe worked with his father. Mrs. Lincoln and Sarah had to find the food. Mrs. Lincoln could shoot almost as well as Mr. Lincoln. Sometimes she shot a deer. Sometimes she came back with squirrels or rabbits. The front of the shed had been left open, and in this opening the Lincolns had their fire, and here they did their cooking. At last the cabin was almost finished. The floor wasn't laid, and the windows and door weren't made, but the Lincolns moved in anyway. It was better than the shed. Mother said they could get along for a while until Father had finished clearing the land for a cornfield. Mother liked the new cabin because it was in such a beautiful place. It stood on a slight elevation in the midst of a large forest of trees. It was shaded by walnut and hickory trees. Nearby were pawpaw and sassafras trees. There were wild grapevines and spice bushes and many kinds of wild berries. All of this delighted Mrs. Lincoln. Thomas, she said, you have chosen a beautiful spot for our home. She hung a bearskin over the open doorway and spread deerskins on the dirt floor. In the evening, after the day's work was done, the Lincoln family sat before a blazing fire in the large fireplace. Sometimes Sarah and Abe ate walnuts or hickory nuts. Sometimes they just sat still and listened to Father tell Indian stories until Mother said, "Time for bed, children." Then up the pegs in the wall went Abe. He slept in the loft on a pile of sweet-smelling leaves covered with a thick wool cover. He had no pillow, but he had a bearskin over him, and he was warm and happy. All the Lincolns were happy together. The cabin was a dear place to them. It was their home, and they loved it. Now I'm going to draw a conclusion here. We know that Abe is working all day long with his father, and we know that they have to work or they won't have a cabin to live in. We know that they have to plant their corn so they will have food. We haven't heard about any other people. So I think that the Lincolns are far from other families and they can't do things with other people. Mother plans for Abe. Mrs. Lincoln liked the new home in Indiana except for one thing. There was no school in the Pigeon Creek settlement, and Nancy Lincoln wanted her children to go to school. She had gone to school herself when she was a girl, and she could read and write. She had learned to love good books and wanted Sarah and Abe to love them. But what could she do? There wasn't a school within 10 miles. Well, she said, we'll have school here at home, and I will be the schoolmaster. The children hadn't gone to school in Kentucky very long, and they had forgotten all they had learned. So Mrs. Lincoln began with their letters. Then she taught them spelling, reading, and a little arithmetic. Remember, I told you that was math. She told them Bible stories and read the Bible to them. She taught them to be honest. She taught them good manners. Abe learned to take off his coonskin cap when he entered a cabin. He learned to stand until older persons were seated. Both children learned to say thank you and good morning and good night. Indeed, Sarah and Abe had such good manners that later on other settlers liked to have their children visit the Lincolns. The school went on. Mrs. Lincoln gave the children as much time as she could, but she was too busy to give them as much time as they really needed. But she found out several things. She found that while both children were smart and learned quickly, Abe was the one who really loved to study. So she made up her mind to one thing. Abe should go to school. Mr. Lincoln didn't agree with her. He had never gone to school himself, and he couldn't read or write. You've taught Abe to read and write, he said. That's enough for any boy who is going to work in the fields all his life. No, Thomas, it isn't enough. Abe is not like other boys. He is more serious, and he asks smart questions about things. He asks too many questions. I tell him to get to work. Because you can't answer him, and neither can I, said Mrs. Lincoln. And that's just the reason he should have a real teacher, someone who can tell him what he wants to know. Well, there isn't any school near enough, Nancy. That settles it. No, Thomas, it doesn't. There's a way. We'll move near a school. And here they are in their cabin. And begin all over again? Build a new cabin and clear new land? Yes, said that determined young mother. We'll begin all over again. Just then, Abe came into the cabin. Abe, said Mother, we are talking about sending you to school. You don't want to go, do you? Asked Father. You'd rather work in the field, wouldn't you? No, said Abe. I'd rather go to school and work with books. Abe, you shall go to school next winter if I live, said Nancy Lincoln. But Nancy Lincoln didn't live. She died in the fall of 1818. It's a very hard time. It's a very sad thing. But remember, I told you that there wasn't medicine. They were far away from people, and people died of things. And we'll talk more about what she died from. But you could tell that Mrs. Lincoln understood exactly how smart her son was. She did not know that he would grow up to be president, but she knew that he was a little boy that was different from other boys. And so she's very determined to find a way for him to go to school. So we'll find out in the next few chapters if that actually happens. Thanks for listening.